Welcome to the Member Showcase today. I am delighted to be joined by Sarah Engeset, who successfully completed the DMIPRO dual certificate from DMI and the AMA earlier this year and is still a power member in our membership community. Sarah is based in Virginia in the US and is currently a senior digital strategist at Ironistic. And Ironistic are a website development company which services companies of all sizes, including associations, nonprofits, government agencies, and even Fortune 500 companies. Sarah has had a diverse career to date before making a career change into the field of digital marketing, and we are delighted to welcome her to the showcase. Thanks for joining us, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
I always like to start in the same place. So just to kick things off a little bit and get the ball rolling, could you tell us a little bit about you and your career and your background to date?
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, and went to Florida State University up in the Panhandle of Florida, graduating with an English major and communications minor. So during school, I did a few editing internships. I thought it'd be fun to work at a publishing company, even though I knew nothing about publishing companies. And then landed at the Florida Department of Health in a communications role with the communications department. And then after graduating, moved over to a smaller department within the Department of Health that had never had someone in this communications position before, which led to not always a full workload. So I eventually taught myself HTML code to pass time through the days, and also so I could help out the web team, who was very busy. And so we would do different kind of training recordings, website updates, kind of restructuring different things, and I really enjoyed it. I liked being in that back-end web development type role. And when I decided to move up to Washington, D.C. a couple years later, I was looking for jobs that kind of merged the two. So had a web development mix along with communications, which was a lot of marketing, social media, email, that type of thing. So in Washington, D.C., I was at the National Academies for 5 years at the Institute of Medicine, so kind of a health-based division, marketing all of the new reports and making all the website updates. And after about 5 years, I was looking for a little bit of a change, and my now husband works at a communications firm that has a partner company that is a website digital agency. So I had known the owners for a couple years and eventually decided to make the transition over to agency life. So that's Ironistic. That's where I am now. So over the last 3 years, I started as a project manager working on different website and marketing engagements. And now as a digital strategist, it's more focused on the big picture as opposed to the day-to-day. So we'll do technical strategies for yoga, e-commerce sites, marketing campaigns for quantum cryptography, and infrastructure. And so it's clients of all sizes, all engagement levels, and each one of them is different. Which is always bringing in new challenges that make every day interesting, new things to solve, new ideas to come up with, in a world that, as you know, is always changing.
Yeah, that's really cool. That actually leads really nicely into kind of the next question I had. You kind of detailed there all the kind of different clients that you have at Ironistic. And I was kind of wondering, things move quite quickly, with digital transformation, particularly in let's say the last 5 years. And I'd just love to get your perspective on how digital marketing transformations are changing marketing for the companies that you work with in your current role, given there's a lot of different size companies, different types of companies.
Definitely. So one thing that I feel like through the years is becoming more and more important is organic search. So within Google, making sure that your company is showing up within the results. But even more recently, especially with the past couple years, ads, I think, are becoming something that people are actually adding into their marketing budgets, which is a newer thing that I think we're seeing, and not only just boosting a post on Facebook here and there, but actually putting some money behind whether it's display ads or search ads, so that people do find you even more.
Yeah, well, I guess we kind of see that trend over this side of the water as well. So it's really interesting that it seems like it's kind of a global trend. there's obviously a very diverse portfolio of companies that you work with. Could you tell us a little bit about how maybe your approach changes for different size companies? Maybe you've got a different approach, maybe for a very, very small 1 or 2 person company as opposed to maybe some of those larger Fortune 500s.
I actually think that the general approach is the same. Something that I've talked a lot with my bosses about is how we want someone at a small company to feel that they are as big of a focus as someone at a really large company. So even if they are at a different level of engagement, they're still getting the same attention and approach, which always starts with a detailed strategy. So even if the 2-person company isn't going to have as big of a budget and implement as many of our recommendations, that we at least start from the same place and they can understand all of the possibilities. So if one day maybe they are a 30-person company, they'll know how big they can grow just from the marketing side of it. But the biggest difference is how quickly they'll see results. So with the bigger companies, they typically do have a bigger marketing budget, so they'll get more dedicated time each day, each week, each month to reach these different goals. So if the goal is to increase search by 10%, they might see it in 6 months, where the littler companies will have to wait a little bit longer to see any changes.
And I guess, again, it's kind of a question that relates to the mix of companies that you work with, but I guess it's kind of also a broader question of just what your general thoughts are. But we've had a very strange 18-20 months, depending on what way you want to measure it, but basically pandemic related craziness. Some companies have managed to still kind of thrive in that, and some have done quite poorly. But generally, your overall outlook for digital marketing in 2022, are you positive on it? Are you kind of optimistic? Do you kind of maybe even see that there might be growth, or kind of what are your thoughts around it coming into the next year?
I think that in 2022, where we'll still see it be hit a little harder is events. Doing 2020 planning with a lot of my clients right now, and when asking if they're going to start attending the different trade shows and events in the coming year, it's always a pause of hesitation of, well, the virtual events have not been super successful because it's just a different kind of turnout, a different kind of attention span that you're getting from people. And the in-person events isn't seeing as high of an attendance rate as previous years, just because the last couple of years have scared a lot of people from doing big events as they used to. So I think that that's one area that we'll still see a little bit of a decline as opposed to before the pandemic. But I think that a lot of other areas, with everything opening up again, will open even more opportunities for marketing in ways we haven't been able to in the past couple of years.
Yeah, and I think a little bit, and it's come up in some recent member showcases, but there are things that were created or put in place because of the pandemic as a workaround, and they're kind of maybe going to live on after it. Things, even just the amount of Zoom meetings we have, or kind of virtual conferences and things like that. So I might share your optimism coming into 2022 that even if we're still affected by lockdowns and different things, that we kind of have put in the groundwork now and adapted a little bit. But I kind of want to bring it back. Yeah,
Sorry,
so no,
I
sorry.
guess that's the other side of it too, that many people prefer the virtual events and won't go back in person. So training wise, especially, it's much easier to do a training at home over a couple hours span than commute into a big city and have to sit there next to people, not have, I don't know, snacks at home or an endless supply of coffee. So I guess there is the flip side, where a lot of companies are, depending on what their event topic is, going to see even more on the virtual side than in-person side.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, kind of all the good stuff comes back like next year, but we get to keep some of the stuff we like from the last 20 months.
Yes, optimism.
Yeah, exactly. I want to bring it a little bit back to you. You mentioned there kind of off the top, and when you were giving us a bit of detail about your background, that you kind of taught yourself coding, which I thought was quite interesting. And you started your career in communications, and then you transitioned to that kind of self-taught, that interest in that subject area. Could you tell us if your background helped you transition into your current role, and what made you consider a career in, kind of web design and strategy.
Definitely. So early in my career, when I did the self-taught coding, I knew that web development was a great field to be in. After moving up to DC and doing the self-taught, I figured I should take a real course in coding to make sure that I had learned things the correct way. So at George Mason University, locally here, I did a web development certification course where we learned how to code a website from scratch. It was a 6-month course, way more work than I thought I was getting myself into. But it was really interesting. And by knowing how code works, I am better able to understand how websites work and what the possibilities are. So in different marketing meetings, if someone is asking a hypothetical question of, well, what if the website did this, or could we do this? I understand how it could work and can kind of on the fly give a couple examples or maybe options of how what they're dreaming up could be a possibility. And then a couple years after that, as I realized I didn't want to just stare at a computer doing coding all day, every day, I kind of transitioned back a little bit more into the marketing side and did a digital marketing certification from the University of Vermont. And then with the details, I guess, and really nuanced lessons that we had in each of them, I feel like the background of each of them has helped me kind of merge the two in the strategic mindset that I feel, well, that I guess I have now for my job of creating strategies. So being able to understand both the audiences of each client or each website or each marketing plan has definitely helped be able to merge everything together and even explain it a little better at times.
No, that makes perfect sense, and I'd be curious to hear what you might advise people who are interested in strategic type digital marketing jobs. What kind of advice would you give them, or do you kind of have any tips or anything to say to anyone that's considering going down that route in digital marketing?
Yes, so never stop learning. When I was at the National Academies and my last couple of days there, my boss at the time said that one of the things that he felt separated me from others was that I always was learning something new, whether it was website specific or marketing or just taking a new course to be able to explain something related to the job. I always felt like there was more to understand, and that the better understanding I had, the better I could be at my job. And so, especially with marketing and DMI, there's little nuances to continue learning. So I did the user experience course earlier this year, and just being able to understand even more will help you create better strategies and be able to explain the differences. And I think that by understanding the different tactics, which is typical of a project manager on website marketing projects, being able to explain why user experience is important, for example, will help you think not only strategically about the task at hand, but big picture. What do we want them to do now, which will lead them into the ultimate goal of converting, for example. So keep learning, take the time. It is important to build up your brain.
Yeah, that's pretty solid advice. Again, for kind of junior members, kind of broadly speaking, what do you think are the most important factors in career development? I guess maybe even regardless of, what kind of line of work it is that you're in.
So we talked about learning. So definitely keep doing that. And something that I think people don't always remember is that it's okay to make mistakes, no matter what you're doing, whether it is in a presentation or you did a task wrong or whatever it may be. It's how you recover from that mistake that's going to set you apart and let whether your client or your boss or your colleague know that you have an action plan of how to fix it. And so they'll trust you in whatever you're doing next, and don't make excuses about it. Just take responsibility and show that you learned why it happened and why it won't happen again. And then kind of tying in with that, you need to be confident in what you did, what you're doing. And public speaking is always a big piece of that, whether it is to a room of 5 people or a room of 100 people. As long as you're confident in what you're saying and you look like you believe in everything that you are saying to the people, you'll become a better speaker in time. And then lastly, get a mentor, whether it is someone you choose or someone that chooses you. Yeah, I've had one at every job I've had, and it has been great. I'm really lucky that I was able to find someone in each role, whether it was an internship or at my current job now, to have someone that not only talks to you about your day-to-day, but what you want to do and how they can help you maybe achieve that, and just gets you thinking about what's next.
With mentors, would you kind of like seek people out, or like would you identify someone in the office and kind of think like he or she looks like they really know everything, they're a good person to kind of shadow, or did it just kind of happen for you?
They actually all have just kind of happened. At my last job, it was my boss. He was my direct boss, and then we had our kind of overarching boss, and so he just taught me the tricks of the trade there. And at my current job, it kind of just happened. We had a couple complex projects together, and I would just always go to him and ask questions. And I don't think I realized he was my mentor until our boss told me. He was like, "Oh, well, yeah, you two, he helped mentor you through your first year, and now you all get all the complex projects." I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's a good point. I guess I do look to him as a mentor."
Yeah.
So I guess
Um,
a combination.
yeah, no, and it sounds like maybe asking questions is, one of the kind of first steps, and just personal skills maybe a little bit too.
Yeah, never,
Um,
no such thing as too many questions.
in terms of I guess professional accomplishments or standout moments in your career, is there anything that kind of jumps to mind?
So it was a presentation actually a couple years ago, right before the pandemic, 5 days before one of our biggest clients' internal meetings. They invited us to come and present at our engagement over the past year. So within 5 days, we had to book our flights and put together a knock your socks off kind of presentation. And my boss felt that it would be best if I gave the presentation instead of him as the owner of our company. So I wrote our script and tasked each of us with different pieces to talk about, and worked internally with our designer on a beautiful presentation. And their tactic was to see how we performed under pressure. And we get there and we're in the front row with all of the CEO, COO, and 100 of their closest partners and clients. And we were the second to last presentation. So after seeing everybody else, it was just kind of, it felt like a big moment to be able to showcase what we have been working on, especially since as a big client, that means it's a lot of my time that we work towards reaching their goals. So it felt like a great accomplishment, especially when afterwards a couple partners came up to us and said, "Don't ever leave them. They really need you. You're doing a great job." So that felt like a turning point kind of moment.
Yeah, that's great. Some people's biggest fear, I suppose, public speaking. They're absolutely terrified of it, so it's kind of a great way to face your fears, I guess, during your career. In terms of advice, and going back maybe to mentors, but what's the most valuable advice that you've been given in your career that you can think of?
It sounds a little cliche, but be prepared or be over prepared. So for that presentation specifically, we knew we were going to be asked questions. We didn't know what they were going to be, but we figured that if the reason that we got the last minute notice was to see how we performed under pressure, we wanted to make sure that we performed well. And so came up with a list of all potential questions that we could be asked and answered them, so that in the back of our heads somewhere there were different questions that could be answered, and never to be afraid to say, let me ask my specialist about this, or let me talk internally about this. I don't want to give you a half-baked answer. I want to make sure that we're thinking through this thoroughly. So yeah, be
Yeah,
prepared.
cool. And just before we kind of wrap up, I like to kind of ask this to most people at the end, just to see what it throws up. But do you have any kind of interesting facts that you can tell us about yourself? It doesn't necessarily have to be digital marketing related or career related or anything like that. Really anything at all.
So my favorite fun fact is that I was an Irish dancer growing up.
Oh,
My maiden name was Sarah Sullivan Kelly. So with that many Irish names, it felt fitting. So I danced competitively all through middle school. And then now I am a Pure Barre teacher, so kind of Pilates, ballet-esque kind of workout. So keeping the kind of health trend dance-esque going on.
yeah. Passing on the skills to the next generation of young dancers. That's brilliant. Well, thanks very much for kind of sharing all of that with us, your background, career development, standout moments, and particularly the stuff around kind of strategic digital marketing. A lot of our members are going to love that, particularly younger members too. So we really appreciate you coming to join us today for the member showcase. Thanks very much, Sarah.
Yes, thank you.